I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have Jerry Zion and Andrew Clay here from Fluke Biomedical, and they have over 60 years in the medical device industry. So I'm going to turn it over to Jerry. Take it away.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. And thanks all of you who are participating in this webinar today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day or evening or wherever you are in the world, because we do have a lot of you that are coming from many, many different places. So let's get started about infant incubator testing. We're going to start off with a little bit of background for understanding the basics of incubators and how they work. Then we'll talk about the importance of testing, global testing standards, and the majority of our time we'll spend talking about best practices for infant incubator testing. Both the very highest level and some quite interesting detail, and finally we'll wrap it up and tie everything together in the review and our Q&A. So we'll start off with a poll question here, and once again, to remind you, you can type your response to this poll question into the Q&A, please. So the question is this: were you or do you know someone who has been in an infant incubator? Yes or no? So just respond with a yes or a no. We'll give you a couple of minutes, a few seconds to have that response before we go on. Okay, so there are over 130 million babies born worldwide each and every year. 15 million are born premature. That's about 1 in 9, and may have illnesses or complications, early childhood diseases or disease states. So why does all of this matter? Well, because these patients are especially vulnerable, or even months of their life. To give you a little bit of personal background here, my grandson was born about a couple of weeks premature. He was born at elevation of 5,000 feet above sea level. We were in Carson City, Reno, Nevada area at the time. So that's high desert. So he needed to be in an infant incubator, and I got to spend a little time with him in the neonatal nursery to just to begin my bonding with him while he was in the incubator. And of course, as a biomedical engineer, I mean, I'm just looking at everything. But it was important that I had this personal relationship with neonatal nurses and infant incubators. And of course, I had that as a biomed as well. But as a grandfather, it's a little different. I'm sure you'll understand. We also noticed late last year, there was an article in the October-December 2018 Journal of Clinical Engineering that discussed infant incubator testing. It was titled "A Study on Performance and Safety Tests of Infant Incubator Devices." The authors are attributed there. Their investigation included 50 infant incubators across 10 different hospitals, and what they found. They did find several faults, both in safety and in functionality of those infant incubators. So if you think that whatever you're doing right now for infant incubator testing is effective, or if you're not doing anything at all, you might want to rethink that about your medical device quality assurance program and make sure you are taking a look at infant incubator quality and performance and safety. So we'll go into a little bit more about that, but we wanted you to know that even your peer-reviewed Journal of Clinical Engineering is talking about the importance of doing these tests. So we're not the only ones. So here's a few basics. The infant incubator is classified by the US FDA as a Class II medical device. Now, I want you to understand the US FDA has a reach that is international in nature, and here's how. Any medical device manufacturer, in this case infant incubator manufacturer, from anywhere in the world who wants to sell their infant incubator in the United States has to receive a clearance to market here from the US FDA. And therefore, after that, the US FDA is able to audit them at wherever their locations are, anywhere in the world. So this is really a global requirement, and the FDA classification really matters here. So FDA Class 2 medical device. The infant incubator is full enclosed. It's carefully controlled environment because it needs to substitute as the mother's womb where the baby was, but now is in the big old cold world, but not quite ready for it. So we need to modulate the temperature, the humidity, the airflow, sound pressure level, noise, if you will, and the oxygen concentration inside that enclosed environment to make sure it is appropriate for promoting the baby to grow up, to mature enough to be able to exist in the big old world without it. So we want to provide this really safe environment for our premature infants, very ill babies, to either heal or to grow up a little bit. In the case of my grandson, he needed a little bit more time for his lungs to develop and be able to really help in the oxygen and carbon dioxide gas exchange. He needed a little bit of surfactant to be introduced so that his lung units would stay open. So that's why he was in the infant incubator, and there were other devices connected too.
So Jerry, on the FDA Class 2, that's generally a moderate risk device, right? So Class 1 is a low risk, and a Class 3 is likely a high risk, like an implantable or something?
High risk could be even like a life support device. And you could argue whether an infant incubator is a life support device or not. Certainly a critical device. But you're right, Andrew. The infant incubator as a Class 2 is a moderate risk device. And we'll talk a little bit more specific details about that as we go through the different testing and how that affects the baby that's
Right.
going to be in it.
So if we're thinking about risk to the patient, or
Right.
doing a risk assessment
Mhm.
on our testing to set up our periodicity for testing, the FDA calls it a moderate, so we should probably think about that.
Well, but it's also a little bit different. I mean, it involves that for sure. We also want people to know that if you're thinking about electrical safety, a Class 2 for electrical safety means something completely different. So please don't confuse the two. There are other webinars that we have done that you can go review about electrical safety. So the incubator has an AC powered heater with a control circuit. It has a water container for humidity. Sometimes those are used and sometimes they're not. They were used a lot in the old days. Now we humidify the gases that the baby needs to breathe in different ways. It has a motorized fan to circulate not only the oxygen and humidification, but also to get the temperature to be equilibrated or equal and uniform within the infant incubator chamber. It has a control valve for oxygen, for how much oxygen we're going to deliver. And it has this temperature servo control that I talked about earlier, the AC powered heater. The servo control has a couple of different ways that it controls. If we use the skin temperature of the baby or a rectal temperature of the baby, that can be the control of the incubator heater, so that the incubator is going to turn on the heater and warm it up, or turn it off and cool it down, depending on the actual temperature of the baby. If we use the rectal temperature probe, that gives us more of a core body temperature of the infant. If we use the skin temperature, it's just the skin surface temperature. It doesn't really give us quite the detailed measurement of temperature that the baby's vital organs are at. So a lot of times the rectal probe is the better one, depending on how sick the baby is. It also can include, but doesn't always include, a scale so that it's easy to weigh the baby and make sure that the baby is putting on weight based on the feeding that we're doing. So here's the second poll question, and again, please use the Q&A to respond, pick your response here. There's a term that's used in the international standards called STC, steady temperature condition, for an infant incubator. And the question is, what does that refer to? Does it refer to A, the moment an incubator hits its temperature set point? Or does it refer to B, when an incubator stays within 1 degree C of its set point for an hour? Or does it refer to C, you're not sure? So please respond in the Q&A for our second poll question, and then we'll go on, give you some more information. Okay, well, let's go on and see who's got the right responses then. So, reaching a steady temperature condition. STC, steady temperature condition, is actually a condition that is achieved after an incubator remains within 1 degree C of its set point for 1 hour. So that means if you're testing incubators, you will need at least 1 hour in order to do that test appropriately and make sure that you've done a thorough job. The graph that we show in the slide is a visual of what's going on when an incubator is first turned on and a temperature is set, say, at 36 degrees C. So let's take a look at that. There's a warm-up time here too that we'll get to. The temperature is mapped over time, and it looks the way you see on the graph. When we first turn on the incubator, there's a test that we do that is about the warm-up time. And the warm-up time is actually the amount of time that it takes to get from ambient temperature, which is the room temperature. We need an 11 degrees C rise in that warm-up time. We're going to measure how long it takes to get that 11 degrees C rise. And of course, it's from ambient, meaning room temperature. That's what the warm-up time is all about. And the reason we want to take a look at that is it's important that that we understand that heating element is actually going to warm up that incubator chamber. And the specification of 11 degrees C in a specific time is really important. So we're going to measure that, and then we're going to take a look at the overshoot. So as this heater element heats up, it's going to overshoot a little bit, or can overshoot our actual temperature set point. So it may go a little bit above that, but we don't ever want it to go more than 2 degrees C over our temperature set point. So we're going to look for that at the appropriate time and make sure that it begins to stabilize and doesn't ever overshoot more than that 2 degrees C. And so this is during this 1 hour of testing that we're going to do, or a little bit more. And then we're going to look for any undershoot as well. And what we want is to see that the stable state and the temperature control is actually it is going to stay within the boundaries, the specification boundaries that the manufacturer gives us. Right? And these tests come from the standard, the international standard for infant incubators. I think that's yeah. I think we'll specify exactly what that standard number is. It's under the umbrella of the IEC 60601. So we'll get to that. So this is kind of what we're looking for, that warm-up time. Then we're looking for, at the finish, we're looking for that stable temperature, the STC. So what we want to keep it in the uniform temperature, humidity, and the humidity should stay plus or minus 10% of the set point. Please mute yourself if you come unmuted. Oxygen needs to be plus or minus 5% of whatever our control setting is. And we'll get to why those are important. Airflow should be greater than 0.35 meters per second. Circulates the warm air and humidity and the oxygen in the chamber. And we want to minimize the sound and vibrations, so the noise level or sound pressure level inside the chamber, because these babies have really fragile ears, and we need to keep that sound level below 60 decibels inside the compartment when there is no alarm sounding. Why is this testing important? Because the fragility of the patient, they really need time to grow up. We don't want them to waste time shivering, crying, things like that. That wastes energy that should otherwise be going to their becoming more mature and growing up and ready to face the world without that incubator. And there are dire consequences of things that can go wrong. For example, if temperature is too cold, hypothermic, the baby shivers, uses up energy shivering. It may cause apnea, they'll stop breathing. It may cause oxygen deprivation, could cause hypoglycemia, so that means their blood sugar will be too low, and depletion of glycogen stores, which means they won't have the energy that they need, the nutritional energy they need to grow up and for their body functions. Or temperature can be too high, hyperthermia. And this can cause cerebral damage. So it's like having a high temperature. If your temperature is too high for too long, it actually causes brain damage. So we don't want any of that to happen either. So you can get heat stroke and death. Sound pressure level is too high. It can cause problems with intracranial pressure. It certainly can cause ear damage. That means the baby may actually be deaf, born deaf, if not taken care of properly. Humidity is important for the respiratory care of the patient. The patient needs to have, we don't want them to have dry gas like desert dry, because that will dry out their lung units, which need to be moist and in order to stay open. If we have infant heat and water loss, it reduces their ability. They really don't have the ability to control their temperature thermally. There's just not enough body mass there and fat stores. The airflow is, as I said before, if it's too high, it will cause the moisture that the baby needs in their skin and everything to evaporate. And that's not good for the patient. So, and if it's too low, we don't get the right amount of mixing of the oxygen and the temperature in the chamber. So those are some of the things that can go wrong if we're not careful. So let's talk a little bit about oxygen concentration here. If we have too low an oxygen concentration, then once again, we don't get the right oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange going for the baby. That carbon dioxide builds up and it causes the baby to have a change in their pH, their acidity or alkalinity, and that can cause problems for the baby clinically as well. Could cause brain damage. But if the oxygen concentration is too high, and too high here means above 40% O2, that can cause retinopathy of prematurity. The baby will become blind. So we don't want them to become deaf. We don't want them to become blind. We want them to have good nutrition so that they grow and so that they begin to mature enough to be outside that incubator. So the infant incubator environment is really, really critical to these little newborn babies that sometimes are premature or have other disease states that need to be managed. A parameter of an incubator function that isn't in an acceptable safe range can even result in lifelong disabilities or death, as I've just pointed out. So there's some other things here too. The cost of care, the idea here, no matter whether we have a government-funded healthcare or whether we have private healthcare, the cost of providing that care matters. So if the cost of care can be higher than the government or the insurance companies will pay, if the patient has a longer stay in the hospital than than is acceptable or reimbursed. So that's what it means to the hospital. Nurses and the clinical staff are part of that care. Patient families care about the costs. If you don't have insurance, this is coming out of your pocket 100%. You don't have any help to pay for this kind of care. And what we want to do is minimize the amount of time that the baby spends in the incubator, all things being equal, so that we need that performance of the incubator to be absolutely spot on. Here's the standard that we were talking about. Under the IEC 60601 umbrella of minimum performance and safety standards internationally, the 60601-2-19 covers infant incubators that are used in the hospital in a level 2 neonatal nursery or a neonatal intensive care unit. There are two other standards also. The other standard for infant incubators is 21, I believe, which is about transport incubators. And those transport incubators include and integrate into them ventilators and other medical devices all together in one unit. So you can move the baby in the incubator from a hospital that doesn't have the facilities that they need to treat that baby to another hospital that does, or from a place where the baby gets born, because babies get born in the backseat of cars and, oh my God, all kinds of different places, to get them to a hospital where they can be properly cared for. So who uses that standard? Well, the medical device manufacturer is supposed to use that standard in their design validation testing. So that means if I am a manufacturer and I design this really great infant incubator, what I need to do is make sure I can prove to the US FDA, ministries of health, and other regulators that my infant incubator is safe and effective for clinical use. So this standard is designed for me to be able to collect information about the design and the functionality of my infant incubator. And it goes along with clinical studies that are done as proof statements there as well. So design validation is what it's intended to be focused about. Well, then those manufacturers take the design validation tests and they use them in identifying the brand and model specific test procedure that you will find in the service manual for that particular infant incubator make and model. So the manufacturer's service manual procedure will be a result of those tests. They may or may not include all of the tests exactly the way that they would have done them from the standard, but they will be based on the standard test methodology and the testing limits from the standard. And that's how they get to you, is through those service manuals. So for independent service organizations, that is, if I'm a company that does the infant incubator testing for a set of different clients, clinics, hospitals, small hospitals, or the like, or if I'm a hospital biomed department, those manufacturers' service procedures and test procedures are important to me. That's what I'm going to use. The auditors who look at my medical device quality assurance program include both Joint Commission and another one that is worldwide in focus is DNVGL. That's Det Norsk Veritas. And we're about 50-50 in the United States now as to whether a hospital is audited by Joint Commission or DNV. And local insurance companies and so forth, and the state health department, which has the power to close down your neonatal nursery or your entire hospital if you are not doing your testing appropriately or if you have too many incidents. So a Joint Commission or DNV accredit the hospital, including the biomed departments and the clinical departments as well, the environment of care, about medical devices, including infant incubators. So now that we've reviewed the background and the basic functionality and where the requirements for testing come from, now let's take a look at some more things, best practices. So there's both nursing and central processing roles here in terms of testing infant incubators. Weekly and after each patient use, the nursing department has some things that they need to do, cleaning the infant incubator, disinfecting humidifiers and things like that. Quarterly, the nursing department and or central processing also need to replace air filters, or when it appears dirty, they need they need to be replaced or cleaned. And there are other things that need to be looked at too, including gaskets and so forth that help prevent temperature loss, thermal loss from inside the chamber. We're also going to look at those as biomeds when we do the preventive maintenance testing. And this is typically going to be once a year that we look at these infant incubators. We're going to do electrical safety tests as well. And we may calibrate the scale if there's one included in the incubator. About every 2 years, we're going to replace the battery, no matter what the battery chemistry is. No matter what the battery chemistry is, we're going to replace that battery because we don't want the battery to fail just when it's needed the most. And that's going to be most important for those transport incubators. Every 3 years, we're going to calibrate the humidifier if, depending on what kind of humidifier is included. We want to standardize our testing procedures. So typically what we would do is we would either follow the international standard or our local national standard, or we would follow the manufacturer's test procedure from the service manual of the infant incubator. So those are the places that we're going to find a test procedure that we can use and standardize on. So that's really important, no matter whether you're documenting your testing with pen and paper and putting it in a file cabinet, oh my God, or whether you're collecting that data more electronically so you can get back to it and easily evaluate failure rates of the different parts of your incubator. Because at the end of the day, it's all about keeping the cost of care down. You want to adopt a consistent inspection frequency. We said once per year, that's what's generally accepted. But you can make a different choice. I'm going to show you one way that you might be able to either cross-check the manufacturer's inspection frequency or come up with one of your own that matches better with the failure rates that you're seeing in infant incubators in your own inventory. So here is a workflow sheet that the University of Vermont came up with and uses in their medical device quality assurance program for evaluating, doing a risk-based assessment of how often the medical device needs to be tested. And there are a lot of criteria here. We have a whole complete series in our MDQA program under Advantage Training to show you how to use this worksheet. The thing I want you to remember here mostly is take a look at that total risk score down at the bottom. If the total risk score is 13 or higher, we're going to look at that medical device twice per year. If it's below 13, we're going to look at it Once a year, there is a lower level that we would look at in a different way. But the University of Vermont comes up with a total risk score of 12, which doesn't quite meet the requirements for twice per year. So they will test once per year. Typically, the manufacturers would agree with that. We, however, have a little bit different opinion. We think that the infant incubator is a more risky environment based on the number of incidents per year that occur and the importance of making sure that this is safe and effective for clinical use. We come up with a total risk score of 16, which clearly satisfies the requirements for doing tests twice per year. So for some of you, you're going to say, well, Jerry, that's fine. I only have 3 or 5 incubators anyway. But others of you are going to say twice per year, holy cow, that's like, I have like 25 incubators and I have a whole bunch of other radio warmers and things that I have to get around to. I don't have time for that. Well, I think you ought to, if you think about what we've covered so far about the risk to the baby, and that baby is the most important thing. You think about how do we want this infant incubator to work if someone we love is the next patient that'll be in it. Whichever frequency you choose, stick with it. Document it in your MDQA, your medical device quality assurance program, and stick with it. Okay, poll question number 3. When testing an incubator, how many places do you currently measure the temperature inside that incubator? And again, please respond in the Q&A. A, one spot, B, 2 to 4 spots, or C, 5 or more spots inside the infant incubator chamber.
Well, it's pretty split between B and C, maybe more Bs.
Well, let's see what the standard says. The standard says 5. Absolutely 5 at minimum. And 1 is a central place. So think about that mattress inside the infant incubator. Imagine you divide it in 4 quadrants. You need a temperature measurement right at the center, and then you need a temperature measurement at each of the 4 quadrants in the center of those quadrants. Now, not only that, but the sensor, your temperature sensor, needs to be not sitting on the mattress, but it needs to be 10 centimeters above the mattress. And that's because the baby and the central core, the vital organs of the baby, are not on the mattress. They're above the mattress by about 10 centimeters. So we really want to control the temperature at the baby's core. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So just if you want to understand the placement of all the places you need to be measuring that temperature, then keep in mind it's 5. That divide the mattress into 4 quadrants, and 1 in the center, and then at the center of each of the 4 quadrants. All right, and we're back to the what are we measuring about temperature? Again, like we did before, the warm-up time and the overshoot. And we're looking at the big picture of incubator performance, make sure that the control band for our temperature doesn't, we don't have a thermal runaway of our temperature control. It stays steady and controls that temperature within the band. Each time you open a porthole or a cabin door, the STC is lost and it has to be achieved again. So you want your measurements to be made inside the chamber. You don't want to be opening the door to move your temperature measurement sensor, which is why we designed our infant incubator analyzer the way that we did. So you set it up once, it's inside the chamber, you're able to run all your tests, and it's not necessary to open that door or any of the portholes. Perform all the tests necessary to ensure proper performance. So that's temperature, certainly the warm-up time, the overshoot, contact temperatures of the surfaces inside to make sure the baby can't get burned on a hot surface, STC, temperature uniformity across the chamber, which you'll get by data logging all of those temperature measurement locations, and the accuracy of the temperature indicator itself. Temperature control and making sure it's working, and the skin temperature sensor, because that's one of the ways we're going to servo control the heater. All right, and here's some more measurements that we need to make and the accuracies that are needed. These come right from the standard. The humidity, the airflow needs to be greater than or equal to 0.35 meters per second. Sound pressure level, oxygen concentration, the scale, and then our electrical safety checks. So it's not just an infant incubator analyzer that you need. You also need some other test instruments to make sure you're covering all of the parameters and making sure you're getting those measurements done appropriately. We can automate some of these tests, and we in fact do in the INCU2 incubator analyzer, so that if you want to run the full standards test right from the standard, you can do that. But there are also a couple of other ways to run those tests. You can select some, but not all of the tests that are required under the standard, or you can just simply connect all the sensors and run a test based on whatever you connect. So I usually connect all of the sensors, put everything inside the infant incubator, and then begin running my tests, run it for about an hour so that we cover that STC requirement. And then after that, I also run electrical safety, which is about another 10 minutes. And then I'm done.
Can you review what STC means again?
Okay, so the STC is the stable temperature. Let's go back and look and see and get it from where we had it before. Steady temperature condition, STC, steady temperature condition. So we were talking about automating testing. Always archive your test results. So my recommendation is you archive them electronically. You need to be able to get them into your database, which is where you're going to be able to best look at your failure rates. Your failure rates are important for predicting when you need to make replacements of components and subassemblies. So make sure you're tracking your failure rates. It's not just about passing the tests. It's also about what are those failures and keeping a look at those. Choose test equipment you can depend on. And the metrology matters here. We'll talk about that in a different topic on a different day. Here's some attributes that you might want to consider. Simultaneous measurement of parameters. Displays real-time results, pass and fail, when you're doing the standards-based tests. Wireless functionality for some countries. Not every country in the world allows wireless communication between your computer and the test instrument, but we have a range that do. Ask your representative to help you with that. And you can create your personalized test sequences. We comply with 60601-2, -19, 20, and 21 for infant incubators, radiant warmers, and transport incubators. Tying it all together, patients inside the incubator are extremely sensitive to environmental changes. We're creating and maintaining a uniform environment so that they can grow up. And we're going to thoroughly test infant incubators to standards or the manufacturer's guidelines in the service manual procedure. And we're going to measure all the parameters accurately and archive our data to have a good track record of the measurements that we have made, that we're ensuring safety and effectiveness for clinical use. The test tools that we use do matter. Their traceability for their metrology and calibration matter. So you might want to take a look at our Introduction to Metrology for Medical Device Quality Assurance webinar for a little bit more information on that. All right. Here's how you can reach us, and we're at a point where we can consider questions.
Okay, so the first one, Jerry, is around how often should electrical safety checks be performed?
So how often electrical safety tests need to be performed depends on where in the world you are. If you're here in the United States, we actually have a local national code which functions as if it was a standard about electrical safety. It's NFPA 99. NFPA meaning National Fire Protection Agency. And we are a bit less, we test less often and we test fewer things when we do those safety tests here in the United States because we have such a huge amount of data collected and we feel like we're still safe in creating safety when we're doing the tests on that basis. So here in the US, we would follow an NFPA 99 and we would do those tests on incoming inspection or acceptance testing. That is when the infant incubator is brand new and it comes in. Even if we have another one just like it already, each time a new one comes in, we're going to do electrical safety testing. If for some reason the incubator went outside of the hospital for repair and came back in, we will do another incoming inspection, including electrical safety when it comes back in. Outside the United States, how often for electrical safety is at least once per year, at least once per year. Some manufacturers want electrical safety done every single time, and their field engineers are supposed to do it every single time if they follow the service manual test procedure. So that's kind of our answer. It depends on where you are in the world, how often you do it, but generally at least once per year.
Can you talk a little bit more about the warm-up time and how you test that?
Okay, so warm-up time. This is it's a good thing to discuss because we don't want the incubator to be warmed up before we start our testing. When we start with it at room temperature, whatever room temperature is. So we really don't care if the room's a little colder or a little warmer than average. Whatever that room temperature is, that's where we're going to start. And what we want to do is have our infant incubator analyzer inside the incubator, and then we want to turn the infant incubator on and begin the heating cycle. We want to measure between the time that heater first turns on and the time it takes to reach 11 degrees C above ambient or room temperature. And at that point, we document the amount of time that it took.
So one of the questions around temperature was, what if we're in a hot country where ambient is already a little high and the rise time or the 11 degrees you're talking about over what the incubator spec?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and that has come up a lot in tropical climates in particular. So especially in Thailand, when we first launched this product, came up immediately. We had a biomed department that was in a remote area, and they did not have a shop that was temperature controlled, so they didn't have air conditioning. They were just at whatever the temperature was. And the temperature out in those areas of the world are very warm already. And indeed, you do not have 11 degrees C between the ambient temperature and and the set temperature of the incubator. So that test then can't really be done exactly the way that it's written in the standard. What we would do is say, all right, so I can't get an 11 degrees C rise, but I can get some rise, right? From my set point, from my ambient temperature to the set point. And I would just document what I can get. I might put a statement in my medical device quality assurance program that says, in our country, when we don't have an environment, a cool environment to shop with air conditioning, then we will document the rise to the set point from whatever our ambient is. And that's what we're going to document. And yes, we understand it doesn't specifically meet the standards.
Another question was, how often should I check my incubator?
The majority of manufacturers agree once per year. We have a little different point of view here at Fluke Biomedical. We think twice per year might be better because of how important it is to the neonates that are going to be in the.
Around the test equipment itself,
So how often the test instruments need to be calibrated? That's a great question too, a really great question. Manufacturers like Fluke, especially Fluke, have an uncertainty band, an uncertainty requirement. How certain are we that a calibration of the test instrument will hold for the period of time that we specify as the calibration life? All right. So we believe right now that our test instruments need to be recalibrated every year because we are absolutely certain that they should be staying within specifications for that time duration. As you get beyond that time duration, then you have more and more uncertainty about whether your measurement is still within the tolerance bands for cal. So we realize that there are some parts of the world where it's really hard to get instruments all the way to wherever the calibration lab is to get them calibrated, and that it can take a really long time and you don't have that many of that test instrument anyway. But to the extent that you can possibly do, our calibration life is 1 year.
can you talk again about the placement of the temperature sensors on the mat and how to best determine where to place them?
Yeah, so it's really this simple. You can even make measurements if you need to in order to come up with this, but you could almost visualize it kind of in your head. You want to make a temperature measurement at the center of the mattress. And then you really want to imagine that mattress divided into 4 equal quadrants. Even if those quadrants are rectangular and not square, that's okay. And in each of those rectangles, those quadrant rectangles, you want to put a temperature sensor in the middle, right at the center of that quadrant. So the center of each quadrant and the center of the mattress, that's 5 points. That matches with the standards, the intent of the standards.
Why would you want to measure all those at the same time rather than moving a thermal probe around, for instance?
Because you want to gauge, you want to be able to see the uniformity of the temperature. And you can only get that by making simultaneous measurements of temperature. So you can see temperature 1 through 3, 4, 5, and that they should all be relatively equal.
Okay, I actually think that's it.
Okay. Want to just remind you of one more thing, everybody, and that is we do have more about Fluke Biomedical training. What you're in right now is a great example of live online training, and we do this all the time. You can watch for it. We record these, we archive them, and you're able to view these by going to our Knowledge Center and clicking on that on our website, and you will get to webinars. So you can go and search all the webinars that we've done. We also have live on location training, which is a scheduled event that occurs in different parts of the world at different times. They're not necessarily regular and pre-planned every year. It depends. But if there's one near you, you can take advantage of it. Or if you can organize the biomed departments and hospitals in your area, you can approach your local distributor, Fluke Biomedical distributor, and request a training event, and we'll find a way to get that done for you. Then there is the on-demand training, which is what I want to put you at right now. The Advantage Training Center is where you'll find all of our courses about medical device quality assurance and how to use our test tools. And we just refreshed the look of that Advantage Training Center. So you can see the courses right up front, even before you register for access or log in. Yes.
Jerry, how much does advanced training cost?
It's free. It doesn't cost anything right now. And so that's because all of it is at a basic level. And we anticipate that we will develop a couple of other tiers of training. We may have a different approach to that training then. But for now, all of that training is free. You get to register for access. Why? Because you're going to take courses just like you would in school. You're going to pass a quiz, which is part of your learning. You can take it as many times as you want to and earn a certificate of completion. That certificate of completion, you get to show to your boss, you get to show to Amy if you're an Amy certified technician for keeping current, all of those things. So those are all available to you as courses. Then there are these others, which are like white papers, app notes, FAQs, other videos. Those are also available outside the training center. But they're included in the courses that you're going to take, so you can see all of it.